I went into Outlast the Jungle expecting a survival competition, people building shelters, finding food, battling the elements. Instead, I spent most of the season watching grown adults recreate high school. The biggest threat wasn't in the jungle, it was being stuck on the wrong team. And some people were. Outlast the Jungle drops survivalists into the Colombian jungle and divides them into teams, each given one important supply: shelter, fire, and bows for hunting. To win $1 million, contestants have to survive harsh conditions while competing against other groups for resources and advantages. But unlike most survival shows, success isn't just about surviving the environment, it's about teamwork and surviving the people around you, since you cannot win alone. Literally, you have to be on a team and split the prize money. Team Alpha, with Ben, Dave, Hallie, Maddie, and Nikki, felt very disadvantaged from the start. They got the worst location on the beach, and their bows were pretty much useless the entire time. With no shelter, they struggled with the bugs and the weather, and with no fire, their food source was pretty limited. Even though they had the bows to catch the game, they couldn't cook it. Team Bravo, with Abby, Marshall, Morgan, Pharaoh, Sean, and Mary, had the best setup but immediately had to vote off one of their players because they could only have 5. That ended up being Mary, which is pretty unfair. She only got a few minutes on the island. And the only way for her to stay would be one of the other teams to kick off one of their members to bring her in, and nobody would do that, so she was sent home the second day. Bravo looked the strongest initially. Fire was definitely the best resource to have, and it didn't take long for them to figure out the shelter situation. It had Abby plotting pretty early on to only bring 2 people to the finale, and had Morgan hating women for some reason. Morgan immediately hit us with the "I don't get along with other girls," so immediately we're getting the high school dynamics. Team Charlie, with Braxton, Brett, Leiya, Sarah, and Wes, were a strong physical team. They were really happy with their shelter, got along well without fire for a while, looked pretty capable, but immediately had turmoil amongst the members. Sarah and Wes didn't really get along, and this kind of led to the other team members to look down on Sarah because she had a really big personality. However, as the show went on, we got to see the truth. Team Charlie was super frustrating because they portrayed themselves as reasonable while acting like bullies. Leiya was constantly isolated, always threatened with removal, blamed for having low morale.
Her value is tied to getting that fire.
Of course she had low morale. Every conversation about her was her teammates not wanting her there. And then when she overheard it, it was just a joke. Every reality show and real life has somebody who says something really cruel and then immediately hides behind, "It was just a joke," which is absolutely the worst argument to hurting someone's feelings I've ever heard. At first I could see why the team didn't really get along with Sarah, with her big personality. However, it seemed to go a lot further for these boys. Wes was really weird with Sarah. He got so defensive about her confronting him about not doing work, and this just spiraled with him always getting angry with her. They ended up kicking her off the team in return for a fire starter, but really just because they didn't like her. And she went over to Bravo, who took her in just so Charlie couldn't get the fire starter. And when the Bravo girls went into Charlie territory to get some coconuts, these guys were so weird about it.
My size alone is an intimidating factor.
Wes got so close to Sarah and was like trying to intimidate her, and then calls her out for being a 5'5" girl stepping up to a 6'7" man, completely missing the point. Sir, you are the 6'7" man. You do not need to be getting in the face of a 5' girl who is not a threat to you in this situation. And it really sucked because I liked him day one when he was the only one open to giving Mary a fair shot, but he quickly revealed his true self. And then had some weird boys club with the rest of the Charlie guys, and all 3 of them just took pleasure in just guys being guys. It was giving frat boys who love hazing freshmen and calling women fridges. It was weird. More on the Sarah reversal. I understood the criticism of her early on. If I'm hot and starving and being eaten alive by bugs and sleeping in the rain, and somebody's yapping and screaming around me, I'm gonna be pissed. I don't think she was wrong in her first fight with Wes about him doing nothing, because we saw him sleeping on the beach, but she definitely contributed to it blowing up unnecessarily. But as the season went on and I got to see the true nature of the Charlie boys, the more I found myself defending her. They kicked her out of Charlie and I felt bad because she was trying so hard to make things better and work hard for the group. And I was rooting for her to get a spot on Bravo, and I'm glad they took her in. which was the obvious move to stop Charlie from getting the fire starter supply, and I was thrilled they didn't get it. One of Bravo's best moments was taking Sarah in, and the difference between the three teams felt like it could have been written in fiction. Charlie is the selfish, exclusive, power-hungry boys club. Alpha was the kumbaya, trying to make deals and make things even, and I really liked them. And Bravo grew to be an adaptable team with compassion for Sarah, and them keeping her when she was proving her spot showed that. Though they did kick her out in the finale to get a bow, but I don't really blame them because they weren't gonna win without a bow. And she took it fine. Another underdog was Leiya. I felt so bad for her and I was rooting for her hard. With Sarah gone, the boys turned their torment onto her. She was quiet and she became a constant target and never really given a chance. She built the shelter, she built the kayak, she had the idea for the fire that was stolen from her and the credit given to Brett. And then they were like, why aren't you excited? I'd be pissed. That's just another excuse for them to call her useless, and they did. No matter what she did, she was always seen as less important to the team, and then called an energy leech and being bad for the team. Her best moment was going behind their back and going to Team Alpha. More on that later. First, I want to talk about Ben's downfall. I liked Ben for the most part. He had me on board immediately with their talk about equality and fairness. And from a viewer's point of view, the girls talking bad about Ben didn't really make sense at the start until the fish spear scene. They're starving to death and you're posing with your spear asking them to glaze you. Please shut up and put it to use. Early Ben was practical and smart, but as the show went on, he seemed more and more self-interested and focused on keeping numbers on their team low so they could get more money in the end. This turning point came specifically after their teammate Dave self-sacrificed. He was a really good guy, and not knowing if he could make it the long haul, he decided to leave so that their team would get fire. And since then, Ben decided he would be like the papa of the team, and he'd run things and take care of the women, which is all fine and dandy, but Nikki said how she felt they couldn't be themselves and do what they wanted to do and reach their full potential. And him being cocky is whatever, but he lost me when he wouldn't let Leiya join the team, which would gain them the kayak that she promised to bring over from Team Charlie. And what's funny is that that's what led him to being kicked off, because they lost the challenge that required a kayak, and they had to vote someone off, and they picked Ben. Karma. And with him gone, Leiya could finally escape the Charlie team and join the girls on Alpha, which was the most satisfying moment of the season. Her sneaking away from Wes while he was sleeping was giving kidnapped victim trying to escape their abuser. It was a very stressful watch, but I'm glad she got out. And Maddie, Nikki, and Leiya pulling that off was cinematic. It felt like an Ocean's 11 heist when Nikki was down in the grass hiding from Brett and Braxton, and Maddie having to pretend that she wanted to switch over to their team and playing to their egos. It was great. And them not even realizing Maddie was lying to them about wanting to join their team just so Leiya could get out with the kayak. And when they realized Leiya was gone and thinking she escaped to Bravo, it was extra satisfying and so funny. But really sad ending for her when she couldn't really keep up with Maddie and Nikki, and they ended up asking her to leave. But I think that might have been the best decision for them, seeing as Bravo was so close behind them in that finale. On the opposite side of the spectrum of the guys on the show starting out fine and then pissing me off, we have the girls who grew on me. From starting out seeming like they were trying to fit a reality TV stereotype Netflix gave them, which could very much be true, to actually having personalities and being likable. Nikki started out iffy to me, with her bad-talking Mary to protect her own spot on the team, talking about getting bad vibes from her on the beach. You knew that girl for 5 minutes. But she ended up being very likable and ended up saying exactly what viewers were thinking throughout the season, specifically defending Leiya and calling the Charlie boys nasty, two-faced men. Couldn't have said it better myself. Abby started out with some villain lines, talking about kicking everybody off until it was just her and somebody else for the $1 million. But I loved the empathy and compassion we got from her as the show went on, crying for Sean who got injured, helping Sarah out, and agreeing to keep her when she proved her spot. Her and Farrell kicking out Morgan at the end surprised me though, but again, I can't really blame them because they would have been at a huge disadvantage in the finale. Morgan was the biggest surprise for me. I did not expect someone who started out by saying she doesn't get along with women to grow on me, but she ended up proving herself wrong and she admitted it. She grew really close with Sarah, calling her her bestie on the island and saying the men on Charlie were awful. She went from not wanting to team up with the only girl to wanting an all-women team to win. And I love the character development. And I felt bad that she got kicked off. From her point of view, that would suck. So we have Braxton, Brett, and Wes, the boys squad on the Charlie team, and then Ben over on Alpha, all of them who pissed me off. Morgan, Nikki, and Abby, the girls who grew on me. Leiya and Sarah, the underdogs I was rooting for. Maddie, Dave, and Hallie on Team Alpha, who were all great through and through. Hallie ended up self-eliminating after wearing herself out in the challenges. Mary, the girl who got kicked off after 5 minutes, didn't get enough screen time for me to have any opinion on her. It sucks that she didn't really get a fair shot to show anything to her team. I felt so bad for Sean on Team Bravo, who fainted over the fire and ended up getting wildly burned and had to get airlifted out of there. That was the worst luck possible. Pharaoh and Marshall on Team Bravo seemed okay as well. Pharaoh seemed contradictory at times. I couldn't tell where his morals lay. He was alright by the end, and I can't blame him and Abby for voting out their teammates for a chance at winning, but I do blame them for not accepting the trades early on. Pharaoh was too quiet trying to please everyone. And lastly, not a lot of screen time to show personality from Marshall, but him quitting because he missed his family was wild to me. They were probably on that island for another 10 days after he quit. He couldn't be away from them for a month. He already lasted 20 days. If my husband came home from a competition to win $1 million early because he missed me, he's sleeping in the yard. Because what do you mean you couldn't be away from me for another 10 days for $1 million? But whatever, I would have checked out my first bug bite. Of course, we gotta talk about the themes of the show. At first, you think Outlast is just a survival show, but when you put people on teams, forcing them to look out for each other and fight for supplies, giving them opportunities to betray each other, you start to realize the lengths people will go to for money and how little some people actually care for others. It's giving the red button, blue button thing from TikTok, but I'm not going to tell you which side I'm on. But it's a side that's worried for others and not just myself. Mic drop. The first theme is obviously power. Who gets to stay? Who gets voted out? Who gets resources? They really could have all just made the deal Alpha suggested right at the start and all been chill and on an even playing field, but teams were selfish and preferred other teams to starve to death than them to have the same shot at $1 million as them. And when you start off on a foot like that, it kind of just shows everybody that this is a fight to the death and everyone's in it for themselves. Even though they all got the resources eventually and it ended up biting the other teams in the back in the end, not having the bows. Though I stand by the fact that the bows were useless to survival the entire time. Theme 2, belonging. Who counts as part of the group? Not only was it a battle of team versus team, but some teams, Charlie, made it an internal thing. Sarah and Leiya were not a detriment to survival in any shape or form, and in fact, losing them messed them up in the long term with losing out on other stuff, like Sarah taking the machetes and contributing to Bravo, and Leiya taking the kayak and contributing to Alpha. It was a stupid decision to isolate the girls just because the guys felt like they didn't belong. Dumb game move, and it bit them in the butt. Theme number 3, self-interest versus teamwork. Ben being worried about how much money he'd get in the end made him refuse Leia's request to save her from the nightmare that is Charlie, and them not having the kayak she would have brought to them being the reason he got sent home. That was like poetic justice. Worrying more about yourself and less about the team ends up biting you in the end. Lesson learned. And theme number 4, gender dynamics. Because of course there is. The women being dismissed, their concerns being minimized, female contestants needing to prove themselves repeatedly. Whether intentional or not, some of the season's most interesting conflicts involved women fighting to be heard in groups dominated by strong personalities. The alpha girls feeling looked over by Ben, who wanted to do all the heavy lifting for them. Sarah fighting with Wes just ended up with her being called crazy and getting kicked out. Leia's work being categorized as useless by the boys, even though she was the smartest in the group and no matter what she did was good enough. It's the fact that the Charlie boys never once would look at Wes yelling and suggest he's bad for morale, or Brett having no stamina and call him useless, but they did that for the girls, and we all know why. The point is that in a show like this, All those women were so strong and easily helped just as much as the men, so any talk about them being less useful in the survival scenario is just stupid. By the end of Outlast the Jungle, I cared a lot less about who could survive the jungle. I cared more about who could survive each other. The most memorable moments weren't building shelters or finding food, though Ben shooting a seagull is lodged in my brain, and I now know that seagull tastes more like fish than chicken. It's good to know. There were moments when people had to decide whether they were going to help someone who needed it or keep their own advantage. Sometimes they passed that test, and sometimes they absolutely failed it. And that's what made this season frustrating to watch at times, but also so hard to stop watching. And what's crazy is that in the end, Wes and Brett decided not to vote Braxton out for a bow, and not having a real bow is probably what cost them in the end. So maybe sometimes you should betray your teammates. Though Team Alpha won in the end, and they got all their supplies the noble way, without betraying anybody. And I was so happy to watch them win, but really sad that Leiya wasn't there with them. At the end of the day, I would not survive this show. I'm not eating snails, beetles, seagull, or snakes. Hell, I don't even like coconut. I'm not sleeping outside, not getting eaten alive by bugs, not human. There was no cannibalism involved. I'm not dealing with these nightmare people. I'm built for luxury. So season 2, don't even try to recruit me. Comment your thoughts on this show, and if you agree or disagree with anything I said, like and subscribe for recaps, deep dives, and more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.